While what happened to me is maybe not nearly as bad as what happened to the people who were recently stranded on the Nightmare Cruise in the Gulf of Mexico, it still was a pretty entertaining story and a very interesting start to a new marriage. It was 1995 and I had just gotten married to my husband, Jeff. He had only met my parents a few times because we were living in Minnesota, and the day after our wedding, we were traveling to California because my parents were giving us another party. So we decided this would be a good chance to have some fun family together travel time. So we coordinated our flight so that we would all be flying together. And when I say all of us, I mean my mom, my dad, myself and my brand new husband of one day, my brother and his girlfriend, and my grandma. So there were 7 of us traveling together. We had stayed up way too late the night before because it was the wedding and the reception and the party. Probably had a little bit too much to drink, so getting on a plane the next day maybe wasn't the best planning, but that's what we did. We got on the plane and there were 2 small children behind us who decided they wanted to scream the entire flight and wanted to kick our seat, so needless to say there was not going to be any sleeping on this flight. This was back in 1995. This was before BART would go to the airport, so traveling was a little bit tougher then. The only real options were to take a taxi, to rent a car, or to rent a van service. And we decided that since there were 7 of us, we would rent a van service. So my mom coordinated all that, had that all set up for us. We were scheduled to get into the airport around 8. But of course, in a typical style of the theme of this whole traveling, our flight was delayed by a few hours. So we ended up not leaving Minnesota until around 8 o'clock, so we were not going to get into San Francisco until 11:30. Now keep in mind, my parents had been in Minnesota before our wedding for 3 weeks, so they had 2 sets of golf clubs, 4 suitcases, and a garment bag. And my husband and I were going on our honeymoon after this, so we had 2 sets of golf clubs, 4 suitcases, and a garment bag. And of course, then my brother had all his luggage. So the flight was delayed. We ended up getting into San Francisco around 11:30 at night. And we had expected when we got there, the van would be waiting for us and would whisk us away to the East Bay. Well, needless to say, we landed and there was no van to greet us. Now, stress levels were starting to rise. We were feeling abandoned, exhausted. We were dragging all of our luggage through the airport. We were trying to find this van that was supposed to be waiting for us. And also remember, this is before cell phones, so you couldn't just go onto the internet on your smartphone and look up a new van service, and you couldn't just make a phone call and have a new van come to pick you up because it was close to midnight at this point. We tried to find another van company, but of course the person at the airport said that most van companies are pretty flaky about picking up their people, and if you miss it, like we did because our flight was delayed, there was really no other option. So we thought, okay, we need to figure out a plan for this. So our first thought was we could get a taxi, but with all of us and all of our luggage, we figured it would take 3, maybe 4 taxis to the East Bay, which we calculated would probably cost around $500, $600, who knows how much. So that wasn't a good option. Our next thought was to try to find another van, which of course we couldn't do. So we thought about we went to the rental car companies to try to get a rental car from them, but summertime in San Francisco, if you don't have a reservation for a rental car, you can just forget it because there were no cars in the airport. We did finally find one rental car company that had a single 4-door sedan. So we thought this is really our only option other than getting a hotel. So we piled in 7 people, 4 sets of golf clubs, luggage, and all of our belongings. So here we are. There were 3 people in the front, 4 people in the back. Each of us were sitting on top of a suitcase with another bag on top of our laps, and we were crammed in. It took us over an hour to load the car because we had to use every possible inch of that car to get everything in there. So by this time it's 1 in the morning. So we've been traveling all day. We were up late the night before. Got everyone loaded in, and we were packed in so tight we couldn't even put our seatbelts on. Not that it probably would have mattered, because if we had gotten into an accident, I don't think anyone was probably even going to be moving. And the car was so loaded down, it was about 4 inches off of the ground from bottoming out. So we'd finally start driving, and we're driving, and we were laughing, we were crying, we were just every emotion you could possibly imagine. And we must have looked like a clown car when it came time to get out. 7 people got out of this one car with all of our luggage and everything else that was in it. So we were overtired and giddy, and we laughed and we cried. So while this honeymoon may not have been as bad as the one of the people stranded on the cruise ship, it still made for a funny story that we still laugh about 18 years later. I learned that when traveling, you can only prepare so far, and the rest you have to just figure out as it comes. I also figured that if my brand new husband could withstand a trip like that with my family, it was probably all going to work out. What was the final time?
5 minutes.